My name is Harold Foster. I'm 61 years old. I spent 32 years in construction management, and the one thing I've always known how to do is read a structure. Which walls are load-bearing, which ones are just there for show, and which ones are about to come down. I did not expect to need that skill at my own son's Thanksgiving table. 3 weeks before the holiday, my daughter-in-law sent my wife a list. 14 dishes, 25 guests, a start time of 5 in the morning. I read it over Corinne's shoulder at the kitchen counter, and I want to tell you, I have been on job sites where men were asked to do less with more warning. Before I go any further, if this is your first time here, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe, and drop your city and the time where you are in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, the day I realized my daughter-in-law had made a serious miscalculation. Corinne and I have been married 34 years. I want you to understand who she is before I tell you what happened to her. She taught second grade for 28 years at Millbrook Elementary. The same school, the same grade, same room number for most of it. She knew every child's name by the second day. She remembered them years later, what they struggled with, what made them light up, who needed patience, and who needed challenge. She is the most capable person I have ever known. She is also, and I say this with full awareness of what it cost her, someone who spent her whole life making things easy for other people. Our son Derek is 34. He grew up steady and careful, a structural engineer, which suits him. He measures twice. He builds things that last. I am proud of him in the way a father is proud when a son turns out to be a genuinely good man. Derek met Melissa 3 years ago and married her a year after that. Small wedding, their backyard, white roses. Corinne stayed up 2 nights the week before, hemming the linen tablecloths Melissa had ordered online. I offered to help. Corinne said she had it. That was Corinne. I liked Melissa well enough at the start. She was sharp, organized, had opinions about everything, and wasn't shy about sharing them. Those aren't bad qualities. The issue, and it took me longer than it should have to name it, was that Melissa's opinions about things frequently included opinions about what Corinne should be doing. And the way she voiced those opinions left no room for the answer to be anything other than yes. I noticed it. I said something to Corinne once, early on. She told me I was being protective. She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't wrong either. The pattern started small. They always do. Melissa's birthday dinner, 14 months into the marriage. A Wednesday text to Corinne. Hey Mom, Derek and I are thinking low-key birthday dinner Saturday. His family, maybe 12 people. Your pot roast would be so perfect for it. No question in that sentence. No, would you be willing? Or, only if you have time. Just the assumption, already dressed and waiting at the door. Corinne made the pot roast. She also made scalloped potatoes, a green salad, and a chocolate layer cake from scratch, because she'd heard Melissa mention once, months earlier, that chocolate cake was her favorite. That's Corinne. She listens and she acts, and she does not make a production of it. Nobody said thank you after dinner. Melissa posted photos of the table on Instagram. The pot roast did not appear in any of them. 4 months after that, they went to Cancun for 10 days. Derek texted me that Thursday. Hey Dad, is it okay if Rufus stays with you and Mom while we're gone, starting Sunday? I said of course, we like Rufus. But I also noticed it was Thursday, and they were leaving Sunday, and this was the first we'd heard of it. I brought it up with Corinne that night. She shrugged and said it was fine. I said, it's not about whether it's fine, it's about how she asks. Corinne looked at me the way she sometimes did, patient, a little tired, the look that meant, I know, Harold, but let's not make it a thing. I let it go. I should not have let it go. Looking back, that was the moment to say something. To Derek, to Melissa, to someone. Instead, I folded, the same way I was criticizing Corinne for doing. That's on me. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, on a Tuesday evening, I was watching the news in the living room when Corinne came in from the kitchen holding her phone. She didn't say anything. She just held it out to me. I read it. Turkey times 2. Combined weight over 20 pounds. Stuffing from scratch. 8 pounds of mashed potatoes. Green bean casserole. Sweet potatoes with brown sugar pecan topping. Cranberry sauce. Fresh, not canned. Homemade dinner rolls. Gravy. Corn pudding. Brussels sprouts. Pecan pie. Pumpkin pie. Apple crisp. A cheese board for arrivals. 14 items. Below the list. 25 guests confirmed. Start time 5 a.m. Kitchen is yours. I set the phone down on the coffee table, picked it up again, read the last line one more time. Kitchen is yours. Not our kitchen, not would you mind, just the kitchen is yours. Like a work order, like someone had put in a request and was confirming the vendor. I looked at Corinne. She was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. Not angry, not yet, just very still, in the way she got still when she was deciding whether something was as bad as it looked. It was as bad as it looked. I'll call Derek, I said. No. She said it quietly, but clearly. Let me handle it first. She picked up her phone and typed back, "That's a lot for one person. Maybe we can split some dishes?" Melissa's reply came in under 2 minutes. "Oh, Mom, you've done it before. You're so much better at this than any of us. We'll be running around getting everything else set up." Corinne read it, set the phone face down. I sat there in the living room and made myself stay quiet, but I was already thinking. 2 Sundays before Thanksgiving, Derek had the family over for a casual dinner. Pizza, a bag salad, nothing Melissa had cooked. I'll give her this. She never pretended to be something she wasn't in the kitchen. The pretending was reserved for other areas. After dinner, while Jenna, Melissa's younger sister, was telling a story, Corinne found a pause and turned to Melissa. "I've been thinking about Thanksgiving," Corinne said. "Maybe Jenna could handle a couple of the sides? Or we could order the pies from Baker's Mill. They do a wonderful pecan." Melissa laughed. It was a particular kind of laugh, warm on the surface, decided underneath. "Mom," she reached over and patted Corinne's hand, "that's literally what you're good at. Don't overthink it. It's always so beautiful when you do it." Jenna nodded. Paul, Jenna's boyfriend, looked at his phone. Derek looked at his pizza. I watched my son look at his pizza and say nothing. Not one word. I had taught that boy to speak up when something was wrong. I had taught him that silence in the face of something unfair was its own kind of answer. He had apparently left that lesson somewhere between his 20s and now. I kept my face neutral. I had learned, over many years on job sites and in project meetings, that showing anger before you've decided what to do with it is a waste of anger. On the drive home, I said to Corinne, "That's not happening." She looked out the window. "Harold." 25 people. Alone. 5 in the morning. No. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know." And then, "I already have a plan." I looked at her. She was almost smiling. "Tell me," I said. That night, Corinne called Pat Calloway. Pat had been Corinne's closest friend since their first year teaching together at Millbrook. 22 years of knowing each other, the way people do when they've shared a faculty lounge and a profession and more difficult parent conferences than either of them could count. Pat had retired to Sarasota 4 years ago. Corinne talked to her every Thursday morning over FaceTime. I sat in the kitchen while Corinne was on the phone in the bedroom, and when she came out 20 minutes later, her expression was different. Settled, like she'd made a decision and it had already taken hold. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, put her hands flat on the surface. "Pat invited us for Thanksgiving," she said. "Her back porch, her grandmother's roast chicken with lemon and garlic. Just the 3 of us." I said, "I'm in." She looked at me. "Just like that?" "Corinne," I folded my hands. "Our daughter-in-law sent you a work order. Our son watched her do it and said nothing. Pat is offering you a back porch in Florida." I paused. "What exactly is the decision here?" She exhaled, a long, slow exhale, like something that had been held in for weeks. She pulled the yellow legal pad across the table and picked up a pen. She wrote a few lines, folded the paper, and set it beside her coffee cup. Then she opened her laptop. I watched her pull up the airline's website. I watched her find the 6:05 a.m. departure out of Columbus on Thanksgiving morning. 2 tickets. Tampa. She looked up at me. I nodded once. She pressed confirm. The text kept coming all week. Monday. "Just a reminder, rolls have to be homemade. Store-bought always tastes like cardboard, LOL. Wednesday. "Hey Mom, scratch pie crust? The frozen kind gets soggy. I found a great tutorial if you need it." Friday. "One more thing. Fresh cranberry sauce, please, not the can. Greg and Sandra are foodies, and I want everything elevated." Greg and Sandra. First time those names appeared. I asked Corinne who they were. She said, "Derek's boss and his wife." I sat with that for a moment. This Thanksgiving, the one with a 14-item list and a 5 a.m. start time, was not a family dinner. It was a professional showcase. Melissa wanted to impress Derek's employer, and she had decided that Corinne's hands would be the instrument she used to do it. Each text arrived with no please and total certainty. Corinne replied to each one with a single word, "Okay." I asked her once if that was wise. She said, "I'm not stringing her along. I'm just not arguing with someone who isn't listening." I had been married to this woman for 34 years. I knew her particular quality of calm when she had committed fully to a course of action. It was the same calm she had with a difficult parent at school. Patient, clear-eyed, done negotiating. The boarding passes were printed and sitting in the dish on my nightstand next to my wallet and my phone. 2 passes, seats 14A and 14B, 6:05 in the morning. 10 days before Thanksgiving, we were already gone in every way that mattered. The only thing left to resolve was the timing. 8 days before Thanksgiving, Corinne drove over to Derek's house to return a spare key that no longer fit their new locks. She came home 30 minutes later and sat down at the kitchen table without taking her coat off. I knew that look. "What happened?" I said. She told me. Door unlocked, stepped inside to leave the key, heard Melissa on the phone upstairs. "Greg is definitely coming. Him and Sandra, the Petersons, people from Derek's firm. I just need it to look amazing. Mom's handling all the food, so that part is covered." Mom's handling all the food. That part is covered. I sat back in my chair. There's a term in construction for a wall that looks structural but isn't. A partition put up to define a space without actually holding anything up. You don't know it's false until you start pulling it apart and the ceiling doesn't move. That's what this was. Melissa had built a Thanksgiving that looked like a family gathering, but was actually a professional event. A staged impression designed for Derek's boss. And the element she'd decided was load-bearing, the thing she'd counted on without asking, was my wife. Corinne finally took off her coat, hung it on the back of the chair, looked at me. "She doesn't think we'll actually do it," she said. "She thinks I'll show up at 5 in the morning because I always have." I said, "Then Thanksgiving is going to be very educational for her." Corinne almost smiled. I got up and put the kettle on. 6 days before Thanksgiving, I called Derek myself. Corinne had asked me not to. She'd already spoken to him directly and it hadn't moved anything. But I am his father, and there are things a man needs to hear from his father even when, especially when, he doesn't want to. Derek picked up on the second ring. I kept it short. "Derek, your mother has been handed a 14-dish list for 25 people with no help and a 5 a.m. start time. She told you it was too much. You told her to do it anyway. I need you to fix that." A pause. "Dad, I know, but Mel's already got everything." "Derek." Another pause. "It's just this one time," he said. I had been on enough job sites to know when a man was repeating words that weren't his own. Those were Melissa's words, preloaded and waiting. I said, "I'm telling you clearly, your mother is not going to be the catering for your wife's networking dinner. Figure it out." He said, "Dad, I really think I love you," I said. "Good night." I hung up. Corinne was at the kitchen table when I came back in. She looked up, read my face. "Well," she said, "he's not ready to hear it yet," I said. "He will be." She nodded slowly. Then she stood, went to the hall closet, reached up to the top shelf, and came back carrying her suitcase. She set it on the bed and looked at it. Then she started to pack. "Before I tell you what we packed, I want to ask you something. Have you ever told someone a hard truth and watched them choose not to hear it? Drop a smite in the comments if you know that feeling. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment, because what happens next is the part nobody sees coming. I want to tell you about an apron. It's a navy canvas one, heavy duty, from a kitchen supply store in Columbus we visited on a day trip years ago. I bought it because I liked the weight of it and the deep pockets. I wore it every Saturday morning when I made my Dutch apple pancakes. Derek still talked about those pancakes, which I took a certain satisfaction in. The apron hung inside the pantry door. There was a smear of dried flour near the pocket that I'd never gotten around to washing off. The night before Thanksgiving, while Corinne was packing, I went to the kitchen. I'm not sure what I was looking for. Something to do with my hands, maybe? I took the apron down and held it for a moment. I thought about all the Thanksgivings I'd stood at that stove with Corinne, 30-plus years of them. She ran the operation. I was support staff, and I accepted that division cheerfully because I knew my limits. I could not chop an onion to any standard she would recognize, but I could stand next to her for 6 hours and hand her things and make her laugh and make sure she was not alone. That was the thing Melissa had missed entirely. Not just the labor, the company. I folded the apron along its old creases and put it back on the hook. It didn't need to come to Florida. It belonged here, but it would not be used this Thanksgiving. I turned off the kitchen light and went back to the bedroom. Corinne had set my suitcase on the bed, open, already half filled with my things. She knew me well enough to start without me. The night before Thanksgiving, after I finished packing, I came back to the kitchen and found Corinne already sitting at the table. The yellow legal pad was in front of her. She'd written on it days ago, 4 sentences, folded once, left sitting on the table like something that had already made up its mind. She unfolded it now and smoothed it flat with her palm. I read it over her shoulder. Derek, I love you. That hasn't changed, and it won't. But I am not able to cook Thanksgiving dinner for 25 people alone. I said so, and no one heard me. We're going to see Pat. We'll be back Sunday. The kitchen is yours. Mom and Dad. She had already added "and Dad" at the bottom, in different ink. I hadn't asked her to. She set the note in the center of the table, reached up to the cabinet above the sink and took down the small glass she used every morning for orange juice, plain, nothing special, and placed it over the note as a weight. We stood there in the kitchen together for a moment, the light on, the house quiet. We're going to hear about this, I said. Yes, she said. Derek's going to be upset. Yes. I looked at her. 34 years of marriage, and she still had a way of looking back at me that said more than most people could fit into a paragraph. You ready? I said. I've been ready for about 2 weeks, she said. I turned off the kitchen light. She carried her suitcase to the door. I carried mine. We called the Uber together, standing side by side in the hallway, and waited. The Uber driver did not ask us where we were going at 4 in the morning, which suited us fine. He had a low radio station playing, and the heat turned up, and Corinne sat next to me in the back seat with her hands in her lap and the stillness of a person who has made their decision and is now simply letting it happen. The Columbus airport at 4:30 in the morning has a specific quality. Not empty, but suspended, like it's holding its breath between one day and the next. I bought us both coffees from a vending machine that were aggressively bad. We drank them anyway. Corinne's phone had 3 unread messages from Melissa, sent the night before. Reminders, role instructions, an emoji. Neither of us opened them. At 5:40, they called our boarding group. We stood in line and I thought, right now, 25 people think there is a Thanksgiving dinner being prepared for them. In a few hours, someone is going to walk into a kitchen and find a note under a juice glass. My phone buzzed as we stepped into the jetway. Derek. Hey Dad, swinging by to get you and Mom around 7. Mel wants her there by 8 to start. See you soon. He didn't know yet. I put the phone in my jacket pocket. We found our seats, 14A and 14B. Corinne took the window. The plane pushed back at 6:09, 2 minutes late, which felt entirely appropriate. When the wheels left the ground, Corinne reached over and put her hand on mine. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. Pat Calloway was waiting at Tampa arrivals with 2 paper cups of real coffee and no dramatic reaction whatsoever, which is exactly what you want from a friend of 22 years. She hugged Corinne first, then she looked at me. Harold, you came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought Corinne might talk you out of it on the way. She tried, I said. Corinne looked at me. Once, I added. We drove to Sarasota with the windows cracked. The air was warm in a way that November in Ohio makes you forget is possible. Salt, green, something flowering I couldn't name. After 30-something years in the Midwest, it felt like a different planet with better weather. Pat's house was small and white, with bougainvillea climbing the mailbox post. Deep pink, almost aggressive about it. A gray cat named Murray acknowledged our arrival from the couch and returned to his nap. We took our coffees to the back porch. It faced a small inlet, catching the morning light in long, flat pieces. A pelican sat on a dock post across the water, doing nothing at all with complete authority. Corinne's phone lit up on the table. Derek, Melissa, then Jenna's number. I turned it face down. Pat looked at me. You know it won't stop. It'll stop when it stops, I said. She handed me more coffee. I sat back and looked at the water and thought, Somewhere in Ohio right now, there is a kitchen with a note in it and no turkey. And here I am, on a warm porch with my wife, watching a pelican sit on a dock post going absolutely nowhere. Some problems solve themselves. Derek told us what happened after, in pieces. I'll tell you what I know. At 7:58 in the morning, Melissa came downstairs in her new linen apron, striped, artisan, bought specifically for the morning prep photos she'd planned. She had a vision for the content. The golden kitchen light, flour on the counter, the start of something spectacular. The kitchen was dark and cold. No Corinne, no Harold, no turkey on the counter, no prep work, no smell of anything. Just the table, and on it, a glass, and under the glass, a folded piece of yellow paper. Melissa picked it up, read it. Derek came downstairs 2 minutes later and found her standing there, still holding the note, not moving. He read it. He told us later he stood for 30 seconds without saying anything. Then he called me. I did not answer. He called Corinne. No answer. Called my cell again, then texted, then tried the house line on the off chance we'd left our phones behind and were sitting home in the dark. Then he called Jenna. Jenna arrived at 8:15, still in her coat. Melissa, can you cook a turkey? Jenna, Mel, I've never cooked a turkey in my life. Paul, Jenna's boyfriend, offered to look it up on YouTube. Nobody took him up on it. Meanwhile, 25 people had confirmed. The centerpiece flowers had been delivered the day before. Greg and Sandra Whitman had RSVP'd within 20 minutes of receiving the invitation. In Sarasota, I was watching a pelican. The clock in Derek's kitchen read 8:32, 6.5 hours to dinner. By 9 in the morning, Melissa had called 4 restaurants. The first said they'd stop taking Thanksgiving orders in October. The second had a packaged turkey dinner but required 72 hours advance notice. The third didn't answer. The fourth, a place called Harrington's she'd bookmarked from a food magazine, was fully booked for dine-in with no takeout available on the holiday. She hung up on the fourth one without saying goodbye. Derek drove to Kroger at 9:30. The Thanksgiving turkey section, a full aisle 2 weeks ago, was down to 3 frozen birds. The largest was 18 pounds and needed 3 to 4 days of refrigerator thawing to be safe. He stood in the freezer aisle with a shopping cart and no good options. He came home with 4 rotisserie chickens from the deli counter, 2 boxes of instant mashed potato flakes, a bag of frozen dinner rolls, a pecan pie in a plastic clamshell, a pumpkin pie from the bakery case with a small dent in the box, a wedge of brie, and crackers. He'd remembered at the last moment that Melissa had mentioned a cheese board. Jenna tried to make the green bean casserole from a recipe on her phone. She got a call and forgot to set a timer. The kitchen smelled like burned onions for the rest of the afternoon. At 1:30, guests started arriving. Greg Whitman and his wife Sandra came in at 1:45, precisely on time. The punctuality of people attending a work-adjacent event who have calculated exactly how long they intend to stay. Greg wore a blazer. Sandra brought a bottle of wine, handed it to Melissa at the door with a smile that gave nothing away. The table looked beautiful. Melissa had a real eye for arrangement. The linen cloth, the white and amber centerpiece, the taper candles at every setting. She had put genuine care into how it looked. Then the food came out. 4 rotisserie chickens on her good china platters. Instant mashed potatoes with a slight gray tint in the candlelight. Frozen rolls cool in the middle. The pecan pie on a cake stand. The plastic clamshell nowhere to be seen, but its impression still faintly visible in the crust. Sandra Whitman looked at the spread, set her wineglass down carefully, said nothing. Melissa smiled at the table and said, "We had a last-minute change of plans. My in-laws weren't feeling well." Greg nodded, said, "That's too bad." In the kitchen, Derek stood at the counter with his back to the room. He had asked his mother to cook for 25 people alone. She had told him plainly it was too much. He had said, "Can you just do this one thing?" Standing there, looking at 4 Kroger chickens on his wife's good china, Derek understood, in his body, the way things land when they finally stop bouncing off the surface, what one thing had actually meant. Pat's grandmother's roast chicken with lemon and garlic was everything she'd promised. Crisp skin, deeply fragrant, cooked with the kind of attention that makes simple food taste like a decision. We had it with real mashed potatoes, buttered, lumpy in the good way, a salad from Pat's garden, and a white wine that turned out better than its price had any right to suggest. We ate outside on the back porch. The afternoon light on the inlet had shifted from the sharp morning brightness to something amber and low, the sun easing toward the palms on the far bank. Murray had migrated from inside to the doorway, occupying the threshold with the self-possession of a cat who considers all boundaries advisory. I was telling Pat about a bridge repair project I'd retired off of last spring. Licking County, straightforward job, terrible weather for 6 weeks straight. When Corinne's phone rang on the table between us. Melissa. Corinne looked at the phone, then at me, then at Pat. Pat looked at her chicken. Corinne picked up.
Mom.
Melissa's voice, a register higher than usual, tight at the edges. Where are you? Do you know what's happening here right now? Do you have any idea? Greg is here. Derek's boss is sitting at our table, and there is nothing ready. You could have at least called. Corinne set her fork down, looked out at the water. Melissa, she said, the same voice she used with an upset parent in a school hallway. Queer, unhurried, finished negotiating. I told you I couldn't do it alone. I said it 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I said it again at Sunday dinner. Harold called Derek directly. No one heard us. A pause. So we thought about ourselves instead. A silence on the line. That is so selfish. We'll be home Sunday, Corinne said. I hope the rest of your evening goes well. She hung up. Pat refilled her wine without being asked. 20 seconds later, my phone rang. Derek. I answered. He didn't speak right away. I could hear him outside, the muffled noise of the party behind a closed door, then just the backyard and the wind. Dad. His voice had changed. The defensive edge was gone. What was left was quieter, the sound of a man who has stopped performing and started feeling. I don't know what to say. I knew it was too much. I kept telling myself it would be fine, that you'd both just... And I didn't say anything when I should have. He stopped. Then, I'm sorry, Dad. Tell Mom I'm sorry. I believed him. Derek had never been dishonest with me. He had chosen the easier path, kept quiet to avoid conflict, let things slide because confrontation felt costly. But that was a failure of courage, not character. There's a difference. And I'd made the same failure myself earlier in this story. He came by it honestly. I know, I said. We'll talk when we're home, Sunday. Go take care of your guests. Is the food good? He asked. I looked at the plate in front of me. The crisp chicken, the buttered potatoes, the warm porch, and my wife across the table from me, finally relaxed, for the first time in 3 weeks, with the amber Florida light behind her. It's wonderful, I said. Pat made her grandmother's chicken. A pause. Good. I could hear him almost steady himself. Good, Dad. Go, I said. Sunday. After I set the phone down, Corinne looked at me across the table. I picked up my fork. Roast chicken, she said. Yes, I said. Please. Derek told us the rest of it in pieces over the next few days. Greg Whitman stayed 2 hours. He was the kind of man who was always polite in proportion to how well a situation was going. Not cold when things went wrong, just measured, giving somewhat less of himself. He ate one of the rotisserie chickens without complaint. He complimented the centerpiece, which genuinely deserved it. At some point, Sandra said to Derek, quietly, Your parents usually cook, don't they? Are they all right? Derek said we'd had a prior commitment we couldn't move, which was true. Melissa, from across the table, said there had been a last-minute change of plans. Also true, depending on your definition of last minute. The two explanations didn't line up by about 45 degrees, the way improvised stories don't when two people are solving the same problem from different angles and haven't compared notes. Jenna had given up on the green bean casserole and was sitting at the end of the table next to Paul. At one point, she looked down at Melissa and said, quietly but clearly, Mel, you should have asked them properly. Melissa, I said don't start. Jenna didn't start, but she held the look for a moment, steady, level, the expression of a younger sister who has finally run out of the benefit of the doubt, before she went back to her dinner. Guests left by 5, earlier than a holiday dinner usually ends, earlier than it would have ended with a real turkey in a kitchen that had been running since early morning, and the warmth that builds in a house when someone has been cooking in it all day. After everyone left, Derek did the dishes. He told me that was the first time he'd washed up after a large family meal. That surprised me until I thought about it, and then it didn't. Corinne had always done it. I'd helped sometimes, but she'd always done it. Standing at the sink, Melissa came in and told him he should have called us more. He turned off the water, said, I did call them. They told me it was too much. A pause. You knew? She said. Yeah, Derek said. I knew. He turned the water back on. Melissa left the kitchen. She didn't post any photos to Instagram that evening. Not the centerpiece, not the table before the food came out. She had taken several earlier in the day, but they stayed in her camera roll. Greg Whitman's next email to Derek was a routine Monday note about a project timeline. He did not mention Thanksgiving. That was all. We flew home Sunday afternoon. Columbus was gray and drizzling, the particular November gray Ohio specializes in. Not dramatic enough to be interesting, just a low ceiling of cloud that makes you appreciate having been somewhere with bougainvillea and pelicans for 4 days. The rideshare pulled into our driveway, and Derek was sitting on the front steps. Not his house. Ours. He'd driven 40 minutes to sit on our steps without calling ahead. That told me he'd thought about it long enough to know a phone call wasn't sufficient. He stood when I came up the walk. We looked at each other. He looked tired in the way people do when they've been honest with themselves about something for the first time and it cost them sleep. Melissa didn't come, he said. Okay, I said. We went inside. Corinne had arrived a few minutes ahead of me, and the kettle was already on. The three of us sat at the kitchen table, the same table where the note had been 4 days ago, the same seats we'd used for 30 years. Derek said, I knew it was too much, and I said nothing. I kept telling myself it wasn't worth a fight. I let Mel treat you both like you'd just be there, and I convinced myself that was okay. He stopped. It wasn't. No, I said. It wasn't. He looked at me. He'd expected more scaffolding around the truth, maybe. I didn't have any to offer him. Corinne put her hand over his on the table. We love you, she said. That's not in question. But we will not be made invisible for someone else's convenience. Not even for yours. I hear you, Derek said. Good, Corinne said, and poured the tea. We sat there for a while without feeling the silence. It was the kind of quiet that only comes after something true has been said and actually received. The quiet on the other side of a real conversation, when everyone in the room has stopped performing. It was the best 30 minutes we'd had together in 2 years. Derek sitting on our front steps without calling ahead, that stayed with me. The moment when someone stops explaining and just shows up. I want to ask you, have you ever had a moment where someone finally heard you after a long time of not being heard? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you today, pass it to someone who needs it. Melissa called on Monday. I answered. I want you to know, she said, that what you did was really hurtful. Melissa, I said, I understand it felt that way, and I'd like you to understand. When you send someone a 14-item list and call it a family invitation, that's hurtful too. We can talk about this honestly, or we can leave it here. Your choice. A silence. Then, she hung up. She called back 2 days later. This time she talked less and listened more. Asked how the trip was. Said Sarasota sounded nice. Said she'd been thinking. She didn't apologize in those words. But she asked questions for the first time in 2 years, instead of only issuing instructions. And I recognized that as the closest thing to an opening we were going to get. Corinne took the second call. They talked for 11 minutes. Longer than they'd ever talked, Corinne told me afterward, without Melissa giving her a task. There was no grand resolution. No moment where everyone wept and understood each other perfectly and pledged to be different people. That's not how it works. What changed was more functional than that. An assumption had been removed. The assumption that our time, our labor, and our willingness were simply available, indefinitely, on demand. That was gone. And without it, things had to be negotiated, which meant they had to be talked about, which meant everyone had to act like people with actual choices. That was enough. Derek started calling more, asking questions instead of updating us on decisions already made. Small things that added up. Corinne signed up for a container gardening class at the community center, Tuesdays, 10 to noon. She'd been wanting to for a year and kept putting it off because there was always something someone else needed first. We booked Sarasota again for March. Pat was already planning which botanical garden we'd visit. One Saturday morning, I put on my navy apron and made Dutch apple pancakes from scratch, just for the two of us. Corinne poured coffee and sat at the counter, and we did not talk about Melissa or Derek or Thanksgiving or any of it. We just had breakfast. I stood at the stove in that apron with the old flour smear on the pocket, and I thought, this is what it was always supposed to be. The two of us in this kitchen on a Saturday morning with nowhere to be. This, right here. About a week after we got back from Florida, Corinne was reorganizing the hall closet and pulled down a shoebox from the top shelf. My handwriting on the lid, photos, miscellaneous. We brought it to the kitchen table and opened it together. The usual archaeology of a shared life. Birthday parties from the 90s, Derek at age 9 holding up a fish with the pride of a man who has achieved something permanent, a church picnic neither of us could date. Near the bottom, Corinne held up a photograph. It was the Thanksgiving, 8 or 9 years ago, based on how the kitchen looked before we repainted. She was at the stove. I was standing behind her, arms loose around her shoulders, my cheek tilted toward her hair. We were both laughing. I don't know at what. The timer was probably going, the turkey in the oven. One of us had said something that landed right. I didn't remember being photographed, but I remembered the feeling. Being there, not watching from a comfortable distance, not stepping in for the moments that required me and retreating for the rest. Just in it, for all of it. Because that was where I wanted to be. Because she should not be alone in that kitchen. Because she had never asked me to be there, which made it more important, not less. That was the thing Melissa had never understood, and the thing Derek had forgotten somewhere along the way, and had to relearn the hard way. You don't send someone you love a work order. You show up. Corinne put the photograph in a small frame and set it on the kitchen shelf, next to the juice glass. We stood looking at it for a moment. We should have gone to Florida years ago, she said. We were exactly where we should have been, I said. Until we weren't. She looked at me. That's very philosophical for a Tuesday. I'm a deep man, Corinne. She laughed. And I thought, that is what the 34 years were for. Not to produce Thanksgiving dinners for networking events. To produce this. The two of us in our kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, laughing at something small, with nowhere we had to be. If you've ever been handed a list instead of an invitation, this story is for you. You don't have to explain your absence to people who never noticed your presence. Here's my question for you. Have you ever set a boundary that felt like a risk, and then felt immediately right the second you did it? Tell me in the comments. And if you're sitting with something right now, trying to decide between staying quiet and finally speaking up, I hope Harold and Corinne's Thanksgiving helped you make up your mind. There are more stories like this one in the description below. We'll see you there.